Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.
Hey, everybody, welcome into another episode of Rounding the Bases, presented by Community America Credit Union, invested in you. I'm really excited about my guest today and an important cause that I want to be able to feature. Quick shout out to my friends. First off, though, at Chief of Staff Kansas City. I'll say it over and over again. A truly amazing partnership with them. I'll do events over there. We do a lot with their president, Casey Wright, in my weekly or monthly newsletter and online stuff and on. But most importantly, that's just my end of things. It's my way of saying that they're good people. They get it. If you're looking for a job, if you're looking to hire, just check them out. At minimum, a great resource, good thought leaders. chiefofstaffkc.com, making connections that matter. I have a connection that I've recently started to get to know that really helped me meet a couple of phenomenal guests. The person I'm talking about is Jessica Colby, and she had introduced me to a recent guest, Chuck Huda. She also introduced me to today's guest, in part because she is the chair of a board that involves my guest today. So my guest is a remarkable leader who is impacting the lives of others far and wide. Her name is Liz Rowe, Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Association Heart of America chapter, the leading voluntary health organization in Alzheimer's care, support, and research. It's a position the former attorney and legal strategist formally assumed in 2024, but she's been a passionate supporter in the fight to end the disease for decades. That's because she knows firsthand the devastation of Alzheimer's causes, not just for those living with it, but for those who love them. And through tireless efforts, she has turned her own pain into purpose, ensuring that one day it's a diagnosis that no longer exists. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I love all types of different interviews on this podcast, and a lot of them are for how to help you grow with your business or different skills or to inspire you. And you'll be inspired today, but also I think that, you may know someone, you might have family that is battling Alzheimer's or who has, but I think it's safe to say that somewhere in your world, you know someone, and this will resonate. And there are a lot of lessons and important pieces to know. And I was thinking too, as I welcome Liz into the podcast, the end of that intro, as I read it, gives me a lot of hope, ensuring that one day it's a diagnosis that no longer exists. I want to start there, Liz. Welcome into Rounding the Bases. We'll talk about all of your background and what you're doing right now. But that to me suggests that at some point, someday, that you won't need to be doing what you're doing, or maybe it'll pivot to something else. Are we getting closer?
We are, and that is definitely my hope. You really hit on why I do what I do, because we finally can say we are now in an era of treatment. And it may not be soon enough for some folks, but there is hope for the future and the near future. And some of those things include medical treatments for people who are diagnosed early enough. And those treatments do not cure Alzheimer's at this point in time, but they give those people more time. And that is all that they want. We also have new diagnostic tools such as blood biomarker tests that are going to be able to help people, and especially those in rural communities and places where they may not have access to other types of treatments that are more costly, to be able to be diagnosed early so that we can have a day where there is no Alzheimer's anymore. That is definitely my goal.
Yeah, I think about this a lot, just in terms of, it feels like so much of what we're doing, what I'm doing on this podcast or with my speaking, revolves around technology, AI. We are in a fast moving world, and it's important to remember that if that's affecting the way we're going about our jobs or even the way students are studying, and we're in this rapidly changing world, this is not new to the medical field. This is not new to research. Of course, the importance for raising these funds and bringing awareness to it, but that the rapid pace of where this world is going has to give a lot of us hope for such awful diseases like Alzheimer's.
Yes, we definitely do have hope because of, like you said, increased funding, but also increased scientific technology. AI is something that is helping us find solutions, maybe whether or not we're going down the right path or we're not. We don't, as the Alzheimer's Association, we do not do the research ourselves, but we work with government entities and agencies, and we provide funding grants actually all around the world. Right, currently, we are funding over 1,150 studies in 50 plus countries on 6 continents. So we definitely are growing, and AI is helping us determine different causes. We don't just look at taus and plaques, which is what people hear a lot about, but we're looking at all types of things. Healthier living. We just had a U.S. pointer study that came out. The results, it's the largest longitudinal study on, effective things that you can do to potentially modify your risk factors. And it shows a positive result for all. So definitely we are in a new era, and we call it the hope generation for this disease.
All right, let's talk a little bit about your background and your story, and then we'll focus more on the association and the chapter and the work that you're doing. Because if you have the background, the resume, and the credentials that put you in the past in the legal field, as well as the music world, you don't end up in the Alzheimer's Association unless there is a story. It just, I guess you could, right? I mean, look, I'm involved in a lot of causes that maybe affected me, maybe didn't directly, but I'm also, at least for me, I'm lucky enough with this platform in and out of baseball to be able to meet so many people and hear the stories. And then I'm lucky enough to be able to share a lot of those. But I think in most people's cases, when you start to get involved at the level you're in, there's a reason for it. So how about for you?
Well, definitely. In my younger years, my family was a very musical family, a very arts-focused family, and I loved all things music, especially singing and playing the violin. But I knew when I was looking towards trying to focus on a career that I wouldn't practice enough to be excellent, and a performance major role was out of the question. But I knew I wanted to do something to help people, and my parents had kind of just always been helpers, and we'd always had all of our grandparents in the Kansas City area with us. Other relatives, I knew my great-great-grandmother, just people, we would go visit friends and church members in the hospital and nursing homes. And so I felt comfortable with older adults very early on in my life. And I thought music therapy would be a path to be able to use my musical skills to help people. And I did do that for a time. And I loved it. I will say it was probably one of the most rewarding careers I've ever had, besides what I'm currently doing. But I knew that to take that next step, I needed to become a nursing home administrator or something along those lines. And I thought a law degree would open up more doors for advocacy, for being able to take that next step. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. And one of my best friends in law school said, "Liz, how does one come to love old people?" And again, it's just kind of an innate thing that some people are really, really good with children, and I am really good and really relate well to older adults. I think I might have an old soul, but I knew that through my legal work, I worked hard, and I had a varied career, but ended in estate planning and private wealth work for the most part, and helped individuals and families, many of them who were dealing with Alzheimer's. But in the midst of that, I also, my grandfather became stricken with the disease, and I needed to do some sort of give back in the community because I wanted to do it, and because it was part of what I needed to do as an associate in a big law firm. And so I got connected with the Alzheimer's Association. I said, "Give me a job," and they had me write some biographies for an art auction they were doing for people who had dementia, and I signed up for the walk, and that was in 2000, and kind of the rest is history as far as my path with volunteering and fundraising and growing as a board member and then a board chair. And finally, after I said, "Put me in, coach," they finally did, and I was able to make that transition. But it was a big step, and it didn't happen overnight, but it was a desire for many, many years before it actually came to fruition.
It's interesting too, because I talked to so many people on this podcast that wanted to be fill in the blank when they grew up and ended up being whatever else it was. And it's always a reminder to me. That's why I'm fascinated by these stories, that very rarely do people end up where they thought they would end up. And I guess I'm fascinated with the journey and how you end up where you do. And it's really inspirational because it's a reminder, I think, to everyone that, if you're present, if you're open-minded, you can get pulled into places, causes, work that really gives you fulfillment and purpose. And it sounds to me that that's what happened. But I don't know how many people that have gone the route of music to law to this. But yet it sounds like this is what you were meant to do. I'm guessing you couldn't have thought of this as you were growing up, right? I mean, what was the goal? Something music related?
Yes, definitely. When I was very young, I thought I'm going to be a singer, an actress, something along those lines, possibly a writer, and something in the creative arts.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed, being on stage, but I was being on stage as a character or someone else. And so as I've gotten older and kind of gotten in touch with my own self and being more comfortable in my own skin, I've been able to say, I have a story to tell and I can help people. And part of my journey was that I lost my parents earlier than some people do. Now, obviously, there are people that lose their parents in childhood, and that is something I can't even imagine. But I did not, expect to lose both of them by the time I was 50. And that really was kind of a changing point in my life, reevaluating what's important, what my legacy would be, and that sort of thing. So that kind of helped me make the jump from, a comfortable career that I did enjoy and I did feel like I was helping people with, but to the next level.
Well, and there's something too. I mean, you talked about enjoying working with an older generation, and certainly when you're in the world of wealth management or in your role from a legal standpoint, that not that excludes the younger people, but you're certainly working with those as they age. And I was talking to Jessica Colby about this, that suddenly you could provide expertise, you could provide services, you could provide knowledge and comfort to those that are going through something, and suddenly you have the knowledge, and that's something that I think differentiates her as your board chair now from say other bankers in her role. And I'm sure that helped differentiate you in your career as well. But we're talking about, as I look at the numbers, 1 in 3 older Americans will die with Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia. So we talk so much about cancer and so many other awful diseases, and I always say they're all awful and they're all worth talking about. But it seems to me as though this is one that, as I said in the beginning of the podcast, will be relatable to just about anyone in some sense. That has to give you, I guess, a lot of purpose. But I don't know if it's overwhelming at all at any point either, because the numbers are staggering.
They are, but we do look at cancer, and I feel like we're kind of 10 or 20 years kind of behind their trajectory as far as being able to get government funding and personal funding for the research that's needed to be done. And thankfully for those who have cancer, the statistics are good as far as the trajectory from 2000 to 2001. Those with cancer, the statistics show that we are making some strides there. But with Alzheimer's, the increase of people who have died from Alzheimer's is over 142%. So we need to get the word out. The association on a national and international level is doing a good job of funding. We have to advocate, and so we go to Topeka, Jefferson City, and to DC every year and ask for additional funding. Right, 10 years ago we were in the $400 million as far as national funding, and then this past year it was $3.8 billion. But we can't stop now, because we are on this trajectory that if we don't do something by 2050, there will be $1 billion of expense to the United States just for care of those with Alzheimer's, and there's close to 400 million right now that 400 billion that are being provided by unpaid caregivers, the care for those. So it's something that we have to work on, and we are trying to do that through community awareness, especially in our footprint of 65 counties in Kansas and Missouri.
Well, let's talk about the Heart of America chapter. That is a very large area when you start to talk about Kansas and Missouri. And it's not just the fundraising, right? It's the education, it's the services. You mentioned unpaid care, 300, if I'm reading correctly, combined 316,000 caregivers providing unpaid care to these individuals. And the challenge for, let's say, a lot of people of my generation. I'm a Gen Xer, and I'm in my 50s. I have not had to deal with this with my parents or my in-laws, thankfully, to this point. But I know a lot of friends who have. We're that kind of sandwich generation right now, and really at any given moment, a lot of people's lives can change. I'm wondering if you can kind of explain the challenges of that, because I think that if we haven't dealt with it, it's in the back of our heads, but we don't really know.
Sure. And that it just reminds me of my estate planning career as well, where people, there's things that you want to put off. You don't want to talk about taxes, death, family issues, or money, but those are all things that you need to prepare for in some way, shape, or form. And so that's why we try to provide programming, educational programming, support groups, those sorts of things. But even in the workplace, people, we partnered with Bank of America in 2024, the National Association, to publish a white paper about cognitive decline in the workplace, because not only are caregivers having to leave the workplace temporarily or permanently to care for someone, like you said, in the sandwich generation, it may be children and adults, but that causes financial strain for them as well as emotional strain, and they may or may not be able to hop back into the workforce. Then there are people who are in the workforce who are experiencing cognitive decline, and how do they maneuver that? How does the company maneuver that and work with them as well? And then there are older people today who have to go back into the workforce for financial reasons. So, it's something that even if people aren't touched today by it, it's something you need to think about, whether you are someone that, works with a private wealth advisor or someone that is living paycheck to paycheck. This disease can cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year if you need care in a skilled nursing facility or something like that. And so it can financially wipe you out. So you need to at least seek out and learn about how you might be able to help yourself through healthy habits and things like that. There are some things that we can't change, obviously, non-modifiable risk factors, like your age. Age is the number one factor for getting dementia or Alzheimer's, or your gender or ethnicity. You can't change those things, but you can change the way your sleep habits, or how you eat, or if you exercise, or if you do brain exercises as well, those sorts of things. And so we just want to get the word out to the general population, but then also provide support directly for those who either have been diagnosed or the people who care for them, because many caregivers do not have time to care for themselves, and then they fall ill and pass before the person they're caring for, like my father did.
Yeah. So many of these numbers, when I read them, are staggering. And correct me if any of our information is wrong. Nearly 12 million unpaid caregivers, estimated providing 19 billion hours of care valued at $413 billion. And then I was reading that Alzheimer's kills more people annually than breast and prostate cancer, which I imagine has in part a little bit to what you were talking about, that if they're 10 years ahead, that's where you want to be. So obviously getting to where they're at will help curb some of those numbers. And then the other one that really stood out to me that I'd love for you to talk about, because I think this would surprise a lot of people, is that approximately 2/3 of those living with Alzheimer's are women, and approximately 2/3 of those providing care for those with Alzheimer's are women. It's a reminder that, once again, and I'm not afraid to say this anywhere publicly, that women end up getting the brunt of a lot. And this is it again. Oh, by the way, you're getting affected more, and we need you to solve the problem. So I don't know why that is. I mean, not the bigger discussion of why everybody always relies on women, but why are women so affected?
Well, that's one thing that we are still researching. I mean, there are a lot of theories. Some people think it might have to do with hormones, or just their place in the family. How they work outside the home and in the home, that kind of thing. There are many, many things that we surmise, but that's what part of the research and why we are continuing to do research because in past historically, most studies or many studies have been done on white men. And so that doesn't translate to women. It doesn't translate to African Americans or Asian Americans, or anyone else. And so we also, like I said, we don't do the research, but we partner with entities who do, and we encourage people if they're interested to go to our website and look at our trial match program, where you can fill out a form and then be matched with trials. They are looking for people who are healthy individuals as well as people who have cognitive impairments, because that's the way we'll know why there is a difference between men and women and different ethnicities as well.
It's an uphill climb, but it's one that obviously is worth making. And I'm guessing that the fulfillment that you get from this, as challenging as it is, I mean, this has become your life's work now, I imagine. And just curious what that brings you in terms of satisfaction to be able to make this type of impact in our community and beyond.
It gives me great joy because, like you said, it's not easy. It's actually one of the hardest jobs I've ever had, but it's personally fulfilling because we want to make sure that in our footprint, and then obviously even further than that, but that everyone knows we're here and that we are their chapter. And as being from living in Kansas City area at any point in time, there's a state line. And so that always is a difficulty. And there are two other chapters that are sister chapters in St. Louis and Wichita, but we have the unique, need to care for people on both sides of the state and people that may not know, in St. Joe, Missouri, that we're their chapter. And if somebody in our metropolitan area doesn't know us and says, I wish I'd known about you sooner, that gives me great heartache. And so we are trying to change that trajectory.
And hopefully we can help with that a little bit today. I will mention this at the end. It'll be in the show notes as well. The website to learn more for this chapter is alz.org/Kansas City. And again, that involves quite a big area. alz.org.org/Kansas City. Or if you are listening outside of this area, because we have people that are listening or watching all around the world, country and world, alz.org is a way as well. There's a 24/7 helpline, 800-272-3900. They make it really easy. I go on the Heart of America chapter right here. I could change location if I'm living somewhere else. And I know you've got family living all over the place, and I do as well. So again, by the numbers, there's a pretty good chance anybody listening will need these resources in some form or another. When we wrap it up in a little bit, we'll talk about some ways for people to get involved in some of the events that you have coming up. But let me go to my baseball themed questions and start with you. And it could be with Alzheimer's. It could be with your previous life of careers, wherever you want to go. What's the biggest home run that you've hit professionally?
Well, I have two things, because one we've kind of hit on, but probably my biggest one is landing my dream job. And it's taken me a little bit of time to do it, but perseverance pays off. And I did say, put me in coach multiple times through the process, but I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that's my biggest overarching career accomplishment. But I also, in my younger days as a lawyer, a very important accomplishment that also kind of dovetails into this one is that I was fortunate enough to become part of the 30th class of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce's Centurions Leadership Program. And through that program, I met amazing young leaders from all different disciplines, industries, backgrounds, and learned a lot more about the city that I grew up in than I ever had known before, and gave back as well through nonprofit service. So those folks have become my professional and personal friends, and their spouses and children. And the past 20 years have been, better because of that as well.
Two fantastic home runs. And just, again, I'm always so, I don't know, happy, so tickled, however you want to say it, to to see and hear about people when they find their true calling, which sometimes, by the way, comes early. Sometimes it comes late. Sometimes it changes as you go along. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I got to do what I dreamed of doing, even though it didn't involve podcasts and pre and post game shows, because those things didn't exist back then. The beauty of it came not from getting to where I wanted to go, but finding out what came from it, which was not just a baseball game. It was so much more than that. So that's part of everybody's journey. How about a swing and a miss? And what did you learn from it?
Well, that one was a little harder for me, but I think I would say that when I got up to the plate, I realized that I was in the wrong game. And that's kind of how I've done it, as far as, starting out on the music and the health services side, going to the legal side, and then coming here. But that being said, what I learned was if I hadn't been in all those other games to get to this one, I wouldn't be who I am or where I am today. So I'm thankful for that, even though I may not have truly known at the time, where I was headed.
Okay, the last one for baseball themed, small ball. What are the little things that lead to big results for you?
For me, it is really getting to know people and truly listening to them and remembering the little things about them and what they care about. Because if you're meeting them where they're at and you're genuinely showing your concern, then, you'll have a friend or an advocate for life. But just being kind and being listening and being there for someone is what really seals the deal for me. And you'll reap immeasurable rewards without even trying, just by being genuine with someone.
It will never end. And actually, I would argue that there's more of a need for it now than ever with how automated everything is. I've been talking about that. We'll continue to talk about it. And I think that I'll continue to speak to groups and speak all over the country on the importance of those people skills and connecting, because while the world gets easier, that part becomes more difficult because everything's on autopilot. It doesn't have to be, though. And I think it's the key to everything. I agree with you. The late David Glass, the former owner of the Royals, said that everything you do in life is about people, whether it's business, baseball, or whatever it might be. And that's true, certainly, with the work that you're doing too. So let's wrap things up with 4 final questions as we round the bases. And the first one involve a little bit of your calling, because I think we all know that volunteering, getting involved in something, whatever that thing is, to give back is very fulfilling. And sometimes you know what that is. Sometimes you have to find it. But you began by volunteering and fundraising for the Heart of America chapter, I think 25 or so years ago. And now here you are. I'm curious what that did for you, just to get that foot in the door and to be able to see that world of things, because it clearly sparked what was the next chapter in your life.
Yes, it was definitely fulfilling. When I first set foot through the door of our old office where we had been for many, many years, and just said, what can I do to help? And back then we weren't in the era of treatment, and there wasn't, it was kind of a death sentence, and people didn't want to go get early diagnosis because, what that meant was, what am I supposed to do next? And basically it was a devastating diagnosis. So through the years, I've learned about how much the association does, how far we've come, how many people are affected, and how we can really move the needle. And, I said yes in my younger years to a lot of other boards and other things. And then I finally realized I'm not going to be great at any of those things if I'm spread too thin. And I want to be really good and really dedicated and focused to 1 or 2 things. And this is what I chose because of the people that I saw working there, volunteering there, and the people whose lives were affected by the cause. So definitely it's changed my life.
All right, second question. We'll go with more serious on this one too. I think you briefly mentioned it. I know talking to Jessica, she mentioned it, and this is very applicable to our area, the Kansas, Missouri area. I live in the suburbs, but we're very close to rural areas. You don't have to go very far to get to rural, and I don't care what subject we're talking about, whether it is internet access, whether it is healthcare access, whether it is good food. That's true, by the way, in inner cities and food deserts, that there is a different level of coverage. There's a different level of access in everything, and that certainly would include this as well. What are the keys to taking care of those rural areas? Because they're dealing with it just like we are, if we meaning in the city or in the suburbs.
Well, I think it's getting out there. Again, we are a volunteer-led organization, so we need to recruit in community volunteers because, again, people listen to people who have a vested interest in them, and we want them to know that we are their chapter. But we also are advocating for those in rural areas to be able to get better healthcare and better treatments. We are looking for board members from our entire footprint. We have a number from the Kansas City metropolitan area, but I'm proud to say we have a new board member from Junction City, from St. Joseph. We're looking at all of our areas. We go all the way from St. Joe and Liberty down on the Missouri side to Pittsburgh and Emporia, Kansas on the and all the way to Manhattan, Lawrence, Topeka. So we are trying to get the word out and advocate so that all people will be able to receive the same treatments for this disease.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm doing a little bit of quick, simple math here, but just a couple of the names that you mentioned, Pittsburgh, Kansas to say Junction City, you're looking at about 230 miles. And so, I mean, we're talking about anybody that's from this area understands how spread out it is. And I've got to think too, that representation, the needs of someone in Junction City may be very different than the needs in Overland Park, or maybe not the needs, but the access. And so there's a necessary voice there, right?
There is. And we work with other organizations. We're fortunate because, like I said, we fund research everywhere, but we do fund some people right in our backyard at the KU Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. And so we are working with them also across the country, across the state of Kansas and Missouri, and with some of their smaller satellite offices or satellite hospitals and clinics and that kind of thing as well. There's a governor's conference on aging this year in the state of Kansas, and we're going to be there. We have a state public policy person. And again, we want to make sure that all resources are utilized for everyone, including access to the infusions that they need right now for some of these early onset drugs. There are treatments right now that are being tested in studies so that those might come in a form of self-injections or pill form, so that, again, people in rural areas don't have to travel 2 hours plus to try to get treatments the same as somebody in Overland Park would be afforded, down the street. So I'll have to get back with you, but we should be making great strides and doing that soon.
Well, I feel like every time that you get back with me, there'll be great developments, and that's the beauty of what you are doing, and the chapter is doing, and the other chapters certainly around the country as well. Okay, third question as we round the bases, we'll go a little bit more lighthearted, more relaxing here. Music, I know, is everything to you. It's everything to me too, by the way. I don't know who doesn't like music. If you don't like music, I don't want to hear about it. But now we all have different types of music that we like. But I told you before we went on, with your past involvement with the Kansas City Symphony and your music background, that I don't know that there's a more relaxing place. I mean, my favorite places to go in town, along with great barbecue, of course, are Kauffman Stadium, although that's work. That's my workplace. The Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, which I'm a board member of, and that's the place that I send everybody to first. But I can't think in the off season of a more relaxing night for my wife and I than going to the Kansas City Symphony. Tell me about your love of that and why it is such a special place.
Well, I grew up with classical music in my life and family. We all sang. We all played instruments, except for my dad. We said he just sang. But I played the violin, Suzuki, my sister, and then my brother ended up playing the piano. My parents played violin records under his crib before he could speak. He was humming the tunes. And so we're just a very musical family. And I know that music is kind of an international language, and saw that again with people who had dementia when I was in my 20s working in these skilled nursing facilities and dementia specific communities, where someone who was agitated or couldn't put a sentence together, if you played songs from their 20s or 30s, they could relax. They could sometimes sing all the words, and just for a moment they were there with you again. And so it's always been important to me. I think the arts are amazing. I want to demystify the symphony for younger generations. Yes. And I think the Hoffman Center is a world-renowned place to do that.
By the way, this is not just us saying like, hey, we are the best. Like, I know this much in the television business, whoever we're close to, we always say is the best and the greatest because that's our experiences, right? And then the next town says they're the best. But when it comes to one of the greatest sounding symphony halls in the world, that's a known fact that Kansas City, we're very fortunate, right? That when it was built at a time where they had the right people and the right resources to be able to outdo so many of the other ones. And that's just what a unique opportunity, I think, here in Kansas City.
It's just one of the many things besides all the great sports franchises that and the barbecue, of course, like you mentioned, that makes Kansas City great. And I think people are finally recognizing that, but we don't want to keep it a secret, but we also know it's a great place to live because of all of us who live here. So visit, definitely.
Yes. And if the secret is still a little bit of a secret, it's becoming less of a secret. By the time the World Cup comes here next year, it will not be a secret for anyone. And that's a good thing. We've got plenty of barbecue to share, plenty of arts, plenty of sports, and much more. Final question, the walk-off. This is where we let everybody know how they can get involved. And I mentioned the website before, alz.org/Kansas City, but also provided people are listening to this when it comes out, there's a big event coming up on October 4th. By the way, if you're listening after October 4th, then check out the website and find out next year's date because there'll always be a next year. Tell me about that. I'm hoping to be there and jump on stage and help in any way that I can. Jessica has recruited me for that. And I told her as long as I am in town and not obligated to anything baseball related. By the way, the Royals can be in the playoffs and I could still be available too because most of my work is regular season. But that's the caveat on my end. But I know it's a huge event. So tell us about that.
Yes, we have 8 walks to end Alzheimer's in our chapter. And the Kansas City Walk to End Alzheimer's is our largest fundraising event. And we use those funds for care and support, but also for research. So we are one of over 625 walks around the country. And we raised the last 2 years over $100 million for Alzheimer's research in both years. So it's an amazing opportunity for people to come out. On October 4th, we just announced literally earlier this week that we are moving the venue because there's an international pop singer that's coming that same weekend. But we are moving from our old location, Liberty Memorial, to Union Station. And we're very excited about that. We will be at the Haverty Family Yards at Union Station the morning of October 4th. And come on out. Registration is free. It is an amazing time because sometimes you can really feel isolated with Alzheimer's and dementia, or if you're a caregiver in particular. And so when you see all these other people coming out and, children, there's dogs, there's adults, there's people who are coming from retirement communities and walking with us, you will find a community. And one of the coolest things we do is a promise garden ceremony where we each have a flower where we walk. And the flowers mean different things. One is a color for a caregiver. One is for an advocate for a world without Alzheimer's. One is for a person living with the disease. And one is for a person who is caring for someone with the disease. Has lost someone to the disease. I lost track there. But there's also one flower, a white flower at every walk. And that is to symbolize the first survivor of Alzheimer's. And we believe that person is alive today. And so that's an exciting and hopeful thing. And we raise those up and we walk together in solidarity. And it's very, very moving. So I hope you can come out. It would be amazing for you to be there. We would love it.
It is on my calendar already. So the hope and the expectation is I will be there. alz.org/Kansas City. And there's so many different ways to get involved in terms of advocacy, in terms of volunteering, education, and so much more, the walk. So highly encourage everybody to check that out. I did a quick Google as you were talking about the international pop singer. I think that might be Chappell Roan, who is a Missouri native. And by international pop singer, that's basically a way of saying she is a massive superstar that happened to come from this area, I believe.
Exactly. I mean, what a boon for Kansas City. I mean,
Yeah.
she's only going to be on the two coasts and here. So we're going to celebrate her. We've turned her song. We're going to call it the Purple Pony, and we are actually turning the Union Station purple. I don't know if you can see behind me. There's a picture. We've done it before on the night before our walk. So on October 3rd, we're turning Union Station purple, and hope all of the concert goers will see it and know that we are here with them. So.
It will show up beautifully in pictures on social media, and then it'll turn over to red for whenever the Chiefs game is after that one, as Union Station does so perfectly. And hey, you get a little Chapel Roan tie in there as well, and that never hurts. By the way, you don't need to be young. I don't listen to as much pop as I do everything else, but I'll admit it. I like Chapel Roan. I think she sounds really good. So I don't know that I'll go to the concert. I might be too old for that, but I'm going to do my best to be at October 4th at the walk. And Liz, congratulations to you, all of your staff, whether it be paid staff, volunteers, and I know that is a lot of people, too many to name, but you guys are doing work that, as you know, saving lives, impacting lives, and changing the future. And so keep on doing what you're doing. Encourage everybody to check out more. And thanks so much for sharing such a significant, important message with my audience today.
Thank you for the time. We really appreciate you and all of your listeners.
It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.